for coming on this beautiful afternoon. This program, Day in the Life of a Pond, I see we've got some master naturalists here. This was originally to be my final project for the freshwater portion of the training. It ended up just being something that was more fun, and I've just kept building it and growing it every time I have an opportunity to tell this story. So, a study in resource partitioning, that is the pond. We're going to start thinking of it today as a resource. How many species use that resource and how do they do it? Well, the quick answer is that they partition it, and they do it in a number of ways, both by time and distance. And basically, they all have to play nice. Some of them won't play nice, but mostly it's all about playing nice. Trophic transfer. Trophic is a Greek word. You could translate it as nourishment, food, energy. Is essentially that everything is moving up the food web from the simplest life forms up to the apex predators. And we're going to follow that food web, not in a linear fashion, but you'll be able to follow it. These pictures, by the way, many of them were taken. This is my backyard. This is it is a pond. It's part of the stormwater detention system. We have 27 ponds. We flow directly. We have a dedicated canal that goes into the Myakka River. We do everything we can for the health of these ponds. So, a day in the life, a good time to start is morning. So, good morning, Mr. Wood Stork at the edge. So, the edge is a doubly good place to start because there is in nature something called the edge effect. That the edge is the most diverse region in an ecosystem. And we're going to see that. A lot of the activity that takes place in this pond is taking place at the edge. So how then do species partition a resource? Well, they do it by having different skill sets and by having different needs. So if you're a bird, the size of being a bird or the size of your beak, this is an interesting example of how that's actually not quite true. We have very different sized birds and very similar sized beaks. So they might be after somewhat different prey. So we know what these birds are? Well, sure we do, the great egret. They also hunt very differently. The white ibis is also different from the great egret. You can see the difference in their bill. This is a probing bill. This is a stabbing bill. And they also then, they have different tools for the job, and their jobs are different. The ibis is going to probe and look, and the egret is going to be stealthy and make a sudden strike. So they're both at the edge. They're both in exactly the same position, but they're going after different prey in different ways. Some animals, the wood stork, has a very specific feeding technique. You can see this lovely pink foot. The wood stork roils up in the shallows, roils up the muck, swings that great large beak back and forth, and when it feels anything, snaps shut very quickly. Sadly, I don't have any pictures of this, but I have seen a little train of birds, the wood stork in the beginning, because his beak can only be in one place at a time. And the other birds know that it's stirring up a lot of potential prey, food. And so behind the wood stork will be the great egret, and behind the great egret were snowy egret, and it was just like this gravy train running along the edge. So birds don't mind taking shortcuts. So we have here very similar feeding techniques with different sized birds. This is called kiting. They look just like they're a little kite on the end of a string. But of course, way different in size and way different prey. These are both the earlier one was a female. This is a female belted kingfisher. We have birds that dabble. So these are blue-winged teals. This is a male blue-winged teal, very recognizable by that dueling scar and the blue forewing. This is the bird that you'll most likely see. The green-winged teal is a very cautious bird, knows that people mean it harm. And down here we have the breeding plumage mallard and the mottled duck. So these are all birds that up tails all, and they are in the shallows. Then we have those that dive. So the pied-billed grebe is here. It's not as common as these other two birds, the double-crested cormorant. Here you can actually see the crest. It needs a tailwind to lift those feathers, but they actually do have two crests. And the anhinga. Now these birds are the ones that you will characteristically see with their arms out, their wings, they're not arms, I'm sorry, their wings, because they have no preen glands. The preen glands would make them more, the oils would make them more buoyant, and they have little or no subcutaneous fat because that would also make them buoyant, and they want to dive deeply. You can easily spot the difference. A little buoyancy here, you see the body in the water, that makes it a cormorant, and this is also known as a snake bird with the long neck coming up. So we've gone from the shallows, we've gone quite deep. The pied-billed grebe, we could not go so deep. The cormorant, deeper and deepest of all would be the anhinga. So they've separated that column of water. The thing about a freshwater pond, especially, I feel very lucky that we live close to the Gulf. When conditions in the Gulf change, those shorebirds, many of those shorebirds come in. And so it's not at all uncommon for us to see a royal tern or two or a sandwich tern or two. And they are also divers, as you can see, but they're coming up for smaller fish. We have some the black-bellied whistling ducks have been in Florida since 1984, and they've really expanded their range. So they're now becoming a much more common duck, gregarious, large numbers. And we have killdeer, who are supposed to be shorebirds. They don't know that, so they will often come to the grassy areas around the pond, and you can identify them by the double bands. Last year, at the end of the dry season, our pond had the littoral shelf was completely exposed. So that change in condition attracted birds birds of the mudflats. We had this out of the blue, a mudflat, and so we attracted these birds last year. So it's a dynamic system, I think is what I'm trying to say, that based on conditions and observant birds, you're going to find yourself with new species from time to time. One of the most exciting for us, and they came for 2 or 3 days. We weren't able to take photographs of them, even though we have really fine photographer 2 houses down. It was a thrill of a lifetime to see these birds go up and down the one deep strip that we had left. There are only 3 species of skimmers in the world. The other 2 are in Asia. So this is a very rare bird. We're lucky to have it. So we had the divers, we've had the dabblers, we've had the occasional visitors, but we also have our hunters. Now, for all it's the symbol of the country, the bald eagle is something of a scavenger. But they can hunt, they do hunt. They hunt in a way that they avoid getting wet. They come up behind fish in a pond, grab them, and then continue to fly just above the surface of the water. And that compares with a well-known freshwater bird, the osprey, a very successful specialist, and you can see all the way down that bird is not taking its eyes off the prey. it is bringing down its undercarriage here. At this, you can begin to realize how very long the legs of an osprey are. You can see that over here too, never taking its eyes off the prey. And you can see that the four claws of those 4 talons, instead of being 3 in the front, 1 in the back, that outer front talon has turned, and now it's going to be 2 on 2. So at the last minute, they put the brakes on, and you can see this really beautifully here, how it's 2 out and 2 back, 2 front, and 2 front, and never taking its eyes off the prey. They can get wet. I explained to some of you yesterday that ospreys can drown. It's rare, and it happens when they've underestimated the size and depth of the fish, because their wings are specifically designed to beat and lift themselves up out of the water. The tendons in their ankles, once they grip, they lock on, and it takes them landing on a branch to trigger that and unlock that. So inexperienced young birds can drown, but it really isn't terribly common. Their feet are full of, you can see here, these beautiful little Velcro tabs. They're designed to really grab a hold of the fishy scales. And they do align the fish, their streamlined aerodynamic. I once knew, maybe somebody who does know, why they always then poke out the eyes. The first thing they do is poke out the eyes, and there's a reason for it. So if anybody knows that, why don't you put it in the chat room, and we can, it's just gone completely out of my mind. Well, those are our 2 big hunters. The eagle, by the way, will scavenge and steal from the osprey. The osprey are very hardworking. We very often see the kestrel and then the red-shouldered hawk. We in Florida more often see this. This is the pale morph, the red-shouldered hawk. We have them, a lot of them around here, particularly when we get a surplus of bunnies or a surplus of squirrels. They're not in surplus for very long. So we've had the divers, the dabblers, the hunters, and now we have the gatherers. This is right outside my yard. Black vultures, most large birds, mate for life, which means until one of them dies, and then they will remate. Black vultures, if you take some time to observe them, are very tender with their mate. They're just a little aloe preening, and they're more likely to share. In flight, you can see them with their emarginated primaries. They like their fish 2 or 3 days old. I don't know why. It's ripe on the vine. We also have turkey vultures. Will be looking for anything, particularly the fish, the lost fish, dead fish, if they're a hot summer. So the hunters around the pond, they divide it by the time of day. So the green heron is going to be our daytime hunter. So they have very similar hunting techniques, but they have divided the time of day. Green heron in the daytime, the black-crowned night heron as at night. We have gregarious birds on the pond, the American coot. Here we have a common galano. There's safety in numbers. They're going to be taken down by either perhaps an eagle, some other predator. It's not nice to see a great blue heron take off these chicks, but they do. So there's safety in numbers for the species, and it's generally survival of the species that seems to be, although individuals like to survive, it's the survival of the species that really matters. And you could love that. How do you not love these great big bulbous feet that don't actually float, but really disperse the weight on the leaves, so they can sort of walk on water. The same thing here. And this is a purple Galano, also a bird of the water. This is a three-colored frontal shield. So we've got some white, red, and yellow. And there's the American coot. They don't exactly walk on water, but they really do have the ability to disperse their weight very broadly. So we've had some gregarious birds. Now we're going to do some generalists. The GreatBlue Heron, she's our largest heron. Generally on a pond, there'll be one GreatBlue Heron, and a GreatBlue Heron may have more than one pond, but a pond will only have one GreatBlue Heron. The snowy egret, they're mostly solitary, but they can be seen. They have a real variety of behaviors for hunting. Sometimes it's hunt and peck. Other times they mantle. They put their wings out to create a shadow. And the young birds have this yellowy green, lime green line down the back. So we also have specialists. This is the Limpkin. This bird, its two mandibles are not perfectly aligned. The top one is a little off center to the bottom one, and they insert that into the snail shell, and then it's just like a corkscrew. They straighten their bill up, and it severs all of the tendons or whatever is holding the apple snail in its shell. They are a pretty bird. They're awful loud. So who nests in the pond? Well, not too many birds nest actually in the pond. The RedWinged Blackbird is going to be up in the reeds, the giant bulrush, the coot and the Galanos will take dead vegetation and build up piles of nests, as will the crane, the sandhill crane. The problem here is that the water level can fluctuate dramatically. It's sometimes in spring, there can be downpours, and with the water level will come up above the level of the nest. And if an inexperienced pair may have built a nest that will get into trouble. Well, they drown the chicks, the eggs or the chicks. And here, finally, I have to tell you, I can't remember how many years ago this was, but I watched this bird for 45 minutes. And by the end of that time, the fish no longer cared. The GreatBlue had a sore throat to beat the band. So sometimes you don't quite get the right match between the predator and the prey. Whoops, it's getting a little dark. Be careful at the edge. Yes, this is ominous. Music sounding. Here's again our little blue heron looking to see what's going on at the edge. He's looking into the Littoral Zone, and this is where the bottom of the pond base gradually deepens and deepens. And so we have emergent plants along that littoral zone. And this is just a glance. We don't have to study these, but know that all of these plants have to be tolerant of a range of depths. So it's not just, well, this one likes it 10 inches. No, it has to be between 6 and 18 inches. So they have various tolerances, and they deal with them differently. The lilies and the Sporedoc have big rhizomes and long stems, so the water goes down, they just float along. So what is it that plants do? What is their function in a pond? Well, they get eaten, but they do, in terms of keeping the pond as a functioning dynamic system, they protect the pond banks, they prevent erosion, they absorb nutrients, lower the algal growth. You can read these. And they provide habitat, critically. They provide habitat for the creatures who are sharing the pond. One of those creatures I don't know if you say your prayers at night, but if you do, thank God for making these dragonflies as small as they are. They have the highest kill rate of any predators, at 95%, and they triangulate their prey so they don't go after the prey. They figure out where the prey is going and they meet them there. So they do a pretty ferocious job. So these are the plants that we see: the arrowhead, the giant bulrush. A little closer in, the pickerel weed, which is great for pollinators, irises, golden canna lily. If you're tempted to sow these seeds, often we can find pods of seeds. They need to be scarified. You need to clip them. Ideally, you put them through the belly of a raccoon, but I'm not sure that you're ready to do that. So if you clip them with nail clippers and soak them for a little while, you may get them to sprout, but mostly they grow through their rhizome. Sporedoc has been under assault for some time. We've lost most of our Sporedoc, but it's starting to come back. And I don't know if it was an insect or some kind of other pathogen, but in all of our 27 ponds, we lost Sporedoc. It is coming back, and that is it. That's the entire open flower. They're edible, not by me, but they are edible. And then there's Alligator Flag. Now the idea here, that common name, is that as the alligator is moving through, those high, delicate flowers will signal the presence of the alligator. I'm not sure that that really works. Alligators. I feel very bad for alligators. They were hunted to the brink of extinction. They have come back. They are potentially dangerous, but it is in the nature of an alligator to be timid and curious both. They don't need to eat but once every 2 weeks or so. In fact, in cool weather, they daren't eat. They're cold-blooded. They're getting their, we eat to keep ourselves warm and keep our brains fed. They're not doing that. They're getting that from these osteoderms down their back here. Where I live, there are some ill-informed people who declare them as nuisance, which means they just are there. Removing an alligator just creates a vacuum for another alligator to move in, so it's really foolish. They do get removed, and they are not relocated. They are dispatched. They can't be relocated. If you don't take them to, if you take them just a little way off, they'll come back. And if you take them a great distance, you're putting them in the territory of another alligator. So it's altogether, we should learn to respect them and live with them. So we know they're an apex predator, but they are also a keystone species because of their drought, the Gator Holes. So they wallow in and they find the water table, which is never too deep, and they create little ponds that then support the wading birds, insects. You got the periphyton, snails, raccoon. It's all to do with the American alligator. Just before I go on, no, I'm not going to talk to you about that. So what else is at the water? Well, we have Florida water snakes. There's more than a handful, green, black, and they're very much appear by zone. And you can tell a water snake. They look like their lips have been sewn shut. This is very easy to see. They are banded. They do hold their banding. So if you see that, you can be confident that you have a non-venomous snake. You still have a really nasty snake on your hands. They will bite and bite and bite. So don't get between a snake and the water, especially this guy over here. That's our cottonmouth moccasin. They're harder to spot because you can see down here they start out banded, but they lose their banding very quickly. This is diagnostic, of course. So once again, just be careful of your surroundings. We want them around, otherwise we'll be overrun with rats. They're doing a terrific job. They're doing their job, and our job is to give them a wide berth. Now, in our region, we are not likely to see this alligator snapping turtle, but he was so sexy, I couldn't resist putting this in as we transition over to turtles. I think you'll find him up in the Panhandle. We have a lot of these Florida soft shells. They're not terribly bright. By way of advice, if you're going to have to pick one up, do it right around here, because neither the front leg nor the hind leg can get your hand, and be prepared for them to be very heavy. The more typical, the red-bellied cooter. We've got the Peninsula cooter, and I once asked one of our teachers, wonderful Jamie, I said, how do you know the difference? She said, I really don't tell you. I just call everything a Peninsula cooter. So there are ways to count the hairpin and bobby pins, and if you want to do that, that's good. I just know that they do a lot. They're omnivores. They do a lot in terms of turning over vegetation on the edges. They have an important role to play. The red-eared slider is listed among the most 100 invasive species because they're sent worldwide in the pet trade. They don't always show this red ear, by the way. Well, that's made you hungry thinking about turtle soup. So time to eat. There's our little blue heron again. So, all right, the pond-wide trophic web. Remember trophic, nourishment, energy. We jump in. So where do we begin? Well, you know it's me, so we're going to begin at the beginning. Oh, I forgot about this. So here's a fellow that says, come on, let's get cooking. So here's a little test. Is that bird and that bird? Are they the same bird? No, shouts. I can hear the shouts from here. No, we've got a little blue heron and we've got a tricolored heron. Good catch. So now we're going to start making some food. So let's get cooking. We begin at the very beginning. We start with the sun. Everything comes from the sun. The sun is energy. And the miracle of these little organelles, chloroplasts, takes that energy and converts it into matter. And that is the foundation of life on Earth. So the simplest little plants that we have, and they live in the water, they live in our pond, will be the phytoplankton, algae and cyanobacteria. And we do know that with climate disruption, we're getting bigger, more robust growths of algae. And that's too big an issue to get into in this program. But they're very beautiful, jewel-like. We did a bio blitz here. Oh gosh, Laura, you must remember, maybe 2015, 2016. And we found just about all of these of the common phytoplankton. So now we've got energy. We've created simple matter, these simple creatures, these plants, who are then eaten by the zooplankton. We also found most of these. They have a gullet. So they're going to eat, they're going to poop it out. And so we've got a whole recycling of nutrients in the ecosystem. And of course, who eats zooplankton? Slightly larger animals. The fish eat them, the tadpoles. So I don't have to go through every step. You get the idea that we start very simple and that trophic web keeps building and the energy becomes more and more concentrated the higher up the food web or the farther into the food web we go. So speaking of that food web, we have a water column. You've got the top, you've got the middle, and you've got the bottom. So at the top, we'll find these kinds of creatures with a big spread to, they don't actually float, but they can get little air pockets at the end of their arms, and they appear to float. Dragonfly larvae, mollusks. When you have a healthy pond, you're going to see a lot of freshwater mollusks. And then the others suspended pretty much mid-pond. And not only location, but specialization. These over here, these are the active hunters, live prey. And we've got some top ones and some bottom ones. So they're not competing. The same thing with the detritivores. They're eating the chewed up muck from some other animals. They're eating stuff. And so they're top and bottom feeders. The whirligig beetle is some kind of creature. It has compound eyes that because it exists just at the surface of the water, half of its eye can see above the water and half of its eye can see below the water. And I don't know of any other creature that has that particular adaptation. And then for all of these creatures, there are larval phases. And this is where it gets really pretty artistic representations. Of course, the mosquito, we have mosquito fish. You wouldn't imagine that that would become a water beetle. This is my favorite. This is the something in my screen is blocking this. This is the caddisfly, and you can see he's put little grains of sand around his body to disguise himself. If nobody wants to be eaten, pretty much everybody will be eaten. It's good to be an apex predator. And next. Oh, this is just reinforcing. This is a mosquito larvae. They all kind of look like this, so I can't really tell you what it is. But even in their larval form, these are really prodigious hunters. Okay, while we click forward. So you get the idea with fish. Some are eating each other, some are eating scum, bottom feeders. So we have the fish, and the fish are all prey. And so that afternoon snack, poor little blue heron, he lost his snack. Well, the afternoon has gotten on. Excuse me, I'm fiddling with a little thing on my screen that you can't see. So sometimes we go hungry. So the afternoon is getting on, and there we go. Dusk approaches. And we know that where you have water, you have insects. Lots of mosquitoes, lots of midges, lots of no-see-ums, lots of, but they are in the column there above the pond. And so, given artistic license, I thought I could include them. And that brings the bats. And the evening bat will be the first usually that comes out at night, but they're here where I live, and they come out above all the ponds at night. So just a little primer here. We have 13 native species. They travel tremendous distances. These are the bug control, pollination, seed dispersal. Those are the services that they provide us. They are a vector for rabies. If you ever see a bat that looks dead, pick it up with a shovel and dispose of it. Do not handle it because they might be just sleeping. And there are cases of people getting rabies. But all in all, these are our friends. I'm preaching to the choir. I don't need to just tell you about this. You know this. Dusk. So now the moon is coming up. This is still from my backyard. Here it is, moonrise. And then we've got a whole different set of players, the Dusk Singers. The cicadas in Florida are, they are periodic, but we have so many species that we are never without cicadas. I've not put a study into it, but there is a really loud one that seems to come about every 5 years. They can be deafening. They don't make their noise the way grasshoppers do by stridulation. They have, it's sort of like an old washboard. They have washboard abs, and they vibrate. The name of it escapes me for the moment. But it is like a timpani, it's like a drum, and it can, as you know, be very loud. There's one in Africa that can deafen you, literally deafen you. So we have The Night is Beginning, and we have the Dusk Singers. The evening chorus, starting with the American bullfrog. I don't know about you, but I have noticed there's a real fall off in the numbers and the volume and the variety of the frog choruses, and that is a worldwide problem. But those that are here love to holler for us at night. It is a wonderful sound, joined by the cricket frog, bronze frog, leopard frog. We also have some exotic invasives. We know these, the Cuban tree frog, the cane toad. Pretty nasty piece of work, but fortunately for us, trophic transfer can work. They would be this lovely barred owl. I say, sure, I'll take that for my dinner. So we do have owls, and the owls come out at night, and they here around our pond, we have 3. We have barred owls. Not always, but every few years or so, we have a great horned owl pair, and the eastern screech owl is a pretty steady resident for us. So they're great birds to have, especially with the rodent population is kept well in track. And so now I think we're winding up. So all the nocturnal animals coming around the pond, taking their share of the food. The bobcat, the coyote, and that little raccoon. So we say good night, good night, and good night to all the baby nocturnal animals. Someday I'll tell you the story of Sophie and the skunk. And here goes the moon. Good night, moon. Good night, moon. Good night, pond. We'll leave that one up. So that is the story of a day in the life of a pond. And I do hope you enjoyed that.